Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. I'm so excited to talk about today's episode and our theme today around breaking rules, because this is something I want to encourage everyone to do more of in 2026, and something that I've given some really intentional thought to, especially in recent weeks, especially as I'm thinking about where do I feel best about my work in 2025? What do I want to continue to cultivate going into the new year? And also, what do I want to empower the leaders that I'm working with to do moving forward? So I'm thinking about how I've modeled some of these things, so I'm going to continue modeling them, and then also how I'm going to continue to preparing my clients to model these breaking of rules as well. So let's dig right in. I want you to think about the rules that you want to intentionally break in 2026, and think through, while we're talking through this episode, think through why you uphold certain rules for yourself and where some of maybe the thought or mindset around some of those rules comes from, because this might be insightful to you. And it might be that there's certain things that you do or certain rules that you uphold without realizing it that might actually undermine some of your values, especially if you're someone who has had some growth personally and professionally in the last handful of years. We often don't recognize how much kind of junk and stuff we bring with us from the past into the current and then to the future without thinking about it. We just keep doing what we've always done, or we keep responding or having defaults that are the same as they've always been, without thinking through, oh, wait, as I'm becoming this new version of myself, as I'm becoming more intentional, as I'm becoming more strong in certain areas, as I'm intentionally upholding certain values in certain aspects of my life, then what does that mean in terms of things I need to let go of or unlearn, or defaults that I need to shift, or mindsets that I need to shift in order to really uphold the values and the behaviors that I want to be upholding and live into the legacy I want to be building, and not undermine the work that I'm trying to do by being stuck in some of these constructs that maybe aren't serving me, and maybe I don't even realize I'm holding on to. So with that, we're going to be digging into 6 rules that I'm breaking in 2026. I'm going to invite you to break all these rules as well. And I would love to hear from you if you have other rules that come to mind for you in terms of rules that you want to break. So actually, just before hitting record, I went over to LinkedIn and I was like, hey, I'm going to record this episode on rules I'm breaking in 2026. I want to hear from you all. So there's going to be a post also on my LinkedIn. If you go to sarahdean.com/LinkedIn, you can see. And I want to see what rules other people are breaking, so you can see what other people have contributed to that post when you go look. But also, please feel free to chime in with the rules that you're breaking, because I would love to have this long thread of all the rules that are going to be broken in 2026, especially for women leaders, especially for people carrying marginalized identities who, again, tend to hold on to rules and defaults, oftentimes very subconsciously because of the way we've been socialized, that are no longer serving us, maybe that never were serving us. So the first rule, digging into the fun here, the first rule that I am breaking is around a productivity rule. So I'm breaking the rule that more output equals more value. And this is actually a rule I started breaking a while ago. When I first started this podcast, which was originally the Shameless Mom Academy, almost 10 years ago, I decided to create 2 episodes a week. And at a certain point, that felt not so sustainable. And yet I kept doing it. And so for 9 years, or almost 9 years, it was 8 years, for 900 episodes, which was 8 years, I created these 2 episodes a week. And at a certain point, like, the more content was not creating more value. Not for me, not for my listeners. People only have so much time to listen. I only have so much time to create. I have my hands in so many other things. And so I actually really had to start thinking about breaking this rule a while ago. So I want you to think about, where do you equate output to value in your life? And maybe where can you back off? I've had this with running in the past. When I was early on running, I always thought, like, I have to run harder and faster, like longer and faster, either more distance or more speed every single time I go running. And more output definitely had, at a certain point, diminishing returns. So where are your returns diminishing when you try to increase productivity? And what do you want to do about that? So thinking through, where do we have a lot of decision fatigue? Where do we experience burnout? And then deciding where you want to leverage some of those productivity points. For me, this is about leveraging and repurposing the work I've already done. I have done so much work and created so much content over the last 10 years, whether it is content on the podcast or curriculum that I've built inside of different communities that I've led, or different talks or trainings that I've led. I don't need to keep creating new things. I can absolutely repurpose stuff that I already have and still very much customize it to the audience that I'm going to be in front of that day. So I'm focusing on that. I'm also focusing on creating more white space. So when I think about productivity for me, my best thoughts come from white space and deep breathing, which I'm really bad at, and having space to think. When I have space to think, I come up with great ideas. When I'm trying to produce too much, I actually become, I actually bottleneck my creativity and productivity. So thinking through for you, do you need more white space to have the best thoughts and ideas, and then maybe only run with one or two ideas instead of just hammering out as much as possible, as fast as possible? So for me, this is tracking energy more than metrics, tracking energy more than hours put into something, and recognizing where does my energy get really constricted, where can it get expansive, and then what are the costs or benefits when it's constrictive or expansive. The second rule I'm breaking is around confidence. So confidence rules and really thinking through the demonstration of confidence when I'm thinking about this. So when we think about confidence, we often think about people showing up a certain way and people feeling a certain way when they show up. And so when we think about confidence, we think about feeling like I've got it and I know I can do it. That is a form of confidence. But could we also be confident with some doubt? And could we even express that doubt? Could we even let that doubt be visible? Can I show up with confidence and say, hey, I don't know everything here. I don't have all the answers, or I'm feeling unsure about this thing, but it's important to me to learn, or I want to ask a question, or can we pause for a minute and slow down? That's all a demonstration of confidence as well. So how can we reframe confidence as movement toward learning, movement toward asking a good question, movement toward figuring it out, rather than certainty that we have it figured out, that we know the right thing, that we're doing the next best step? So thinking through this myth that clarity means never questioning yourself, or that confidence means having it all figured out before we speak up or say something or take action. This also allows us to show a little bit of doubt, to be a little bit imperfect, and let that be part of our confidence. The third rule I'm breaking this year is around communication. And so I want you to think about communication for you, especially as women. We have a lot of rules for ourselves around communication that are oftentimes created out of shoulds, that we should communicate a certain way. So we should be courteous, we should be nice, we should be kind, we should be gentle, we should be soft, we should take care of other people in our communication. That our messaging should make other people more comfortable, or our messaging shouldn't upset others. And so this holds women back from being direct, it holds women back from being clear, and we worry about, I'm using very generally, but we worry about coming across as rude or coming across as cold. When we're being overly nice, we end up sacrificing power and position. When we're taking responsibility for other people's responses to our words or to our actions, we are often really hindering our own voice and our own power. And so, of course, we want to be responsible in our words and our actions, our behaviors, so that we're not intentionally creating harm. And we can absolutely be assertive and firm and clear and direct without being rude and harmful and cold and all these other things, without having to take responsibility for how someone else is going to respond or how what we say is going to make someone else feel. And so this is something I've really been working on. And I actually just recently had to send a message where my inclination, because I thought the person on the other side might be uncomfortable, my inclination was like to add more exclamation points and add emojis and put in a smiley face. But when I really thought about the purpose of the message I was sending, I knew that this message needed to come across in a way that I was standing up for myself, I was standing up for some really specific values, and I was standing up for women in general. And I thought, if I start putting exclamation points and smiley faces in here, and I try softening it too much to make the other person receiving the message more comfortable, I'm diluting my power and the mission of this message. So the message was very respectful, but it was also very clear. And I did not go out of my way to be soft and sweet and make the other person comfortable. Instead, I made it really clear that this message is really important. Here's why it's really important. I'm going to be direct with you. And what you decide to do with this, it's on you. And I understand if you want to, if you decide you want to have a conversation about this, I'm open to that. And if you decide you don't want to have a conversation with that, I completely understand and I'm happy to move on. And so I was able to send out this message and be clear and be firm without feeling like I need to put in a smiley face here and there. And I need to make, again, like soften the blow for someone else, because that's not my responsibility. So thinking through in communication, how can you be communicating in a way that lets you own your power, that lets you own your position, and is not focused on how you can be nice, how you can make someone else comfortable, how you can look quote unquote good in the situation, but instead it's focusing on what are the values I'm upholding here? What's the messaging that I need to get across? What is the thing I'm standing for here? And how am I making that really, really clear? The fourth rule that I'm breaking in 2026 is around visibility. And so when we think about visibility, I want you to be thinking about how you're visible, when you're visible, where you're visible, what this looks like to you, what it's looked like in the past, and then what you want it to look like moving forward. Oftentimes when we move into new spaces, so into a new year would be part of that. When we're moving into a new year, into a space where we haven't been before, we get caught up in bringing other people's past perceptions of us into the situation. So instead of showing up as the person that we're becoming or the person who wants to own a space in a certain way, we show up as this past version of ourselves. The best example of this is when you go to like a high school reunion and you might be the most self-assured 35, 40, 45, 50, 55-year-old person. You walk into a high school reunion and all of a sudden you are like 17 and a half years old and you've never felt more vulnerable, naked, afraid, scared, and insecure in your life. Like you just immediately become that 17 and a half year old ball of insecurity and you don't even recognize yourself. Because when you go into that space, all of a sudden you are limiting your visibility to other people's past perceptions of you. So I want you to think through as you step into a new year, how are you going to show up in spaces as the 2026 version of you? Which means you're going to honor where the 2025 version of you has been. What have you learned and earned and attained? And how are you really intentionally bringing that forward and owning and honoring everything that's come with you from the past up until this point? And then using that to show up new with a new level of visibility in spaces in 2026 without bringing other people's past perceptions and instead owning who you are because of where you've been. So for me, I'm thinking through, okay, in 2026, how am I bringing my 50-year-old self? How am I bringing myself who's been now a business owner for 23 years? How am I bringing this version of myself that's almost done with my master's degree? How am I bringing this version of myself that's had a lot of career firsts in the last few years and really honoring all those pieces so that I get to be the most full, big, visible, loud, bold version of myself and not worrying that, oh, this other person in the room only maybe knows like the 2022 version of me or the 2018 version of me or the November 2025 version of me from, just a month or two ago. That I'm really deciding intentionally how I want to take up space. So when we're thinking about visibility, thinking about where we limit what we think we're allowed to talk about because of other people's perceptions of us, where we limit ourselves thinking that we need to be invited to be in certain places. And so for me, this has been a huge one as I've transitioned in careers at different stages in my life. Waiting to be invited to the places that you want to be is one of the fastest ways to misery. So stop waiting for invitations and inviting yourself into the spaces where you want to be, figuring out how to get yourself in the room without needing someone else's invitation, without needing someone else's approval, figuring out how to position yourself in a way to prove that you deserve to be there and that you don't need to wait for someone else to see that in you, that you're honoring that enough yourself, that gets you in the room. That also gives you permission to stop waiting for someone else to introduce or advocate for you, and you start advocating for yourself. So really practicing that self-advocacy in however you want to be visible in the new year. The fifth rule that I am breaking for myself in 2026 is around career and midlife career narratives. And so when being in the season of being 50 and almost done with my master's degree and all these different things, I'm really thinking through where am I right now and what does this mean? And there's been times in my career and years where I've wrapped up a year and thought, oh, I thought I'd be further by now. There's been times when I've kicked off New Year's and thought, oh, I thought I'd be further by now. And I'm really not letting myself think any of that. It's funny sometimes when I compare friends who have been on a career path, like the same career path since college, and I'll notice like, oh, they have this title because they've been, working their way up slow and steady the whole way. And I've made these pivots and adjustments and done things differently. It's easy to think, oh, if I'd like picked one thing and stayed in that lane, like where would I be? Would I be the CEO of Amazon right now? Like, no, I wouldn't, and nor do I want to be. Let's be clear on that. But like, what could things look like? And so sometimes we can get sucked into this narrative around like, oh, I should have it figured out, or I should be to a certain place, or by a certain age, I thought I would have met some sort of mark or metric. And so when we're not there, then we think, well, I guess I'm just going to ride this out. And we start to settle for like, well, I don't know, this wasn't where I thought I would be, or this maybe isn't what I would have chosen, but here I am. And now I'm so close to the end, I may as well just settle in and get comfortable, stay comfortable. I'm absolutely breaking all of those rules because I very much see where I am in midlife right now as a place to be intentionally expansive, not a place to ride out a plateau. In fact, I can't think of anything worse or more boring or actually more disempowering than trying to ride out a plateau for the next 15 to 20 years of my career. Like that's a lifetime. So for me, I'm really thinking through this feels like a very expansive season. And that feels exciting. It makes it feel like, oh, I'm on the upswing right now. I'm just getting started. And in a lot of ways, I am just getting started in a lot of different things. And anyone can harness that energy. You don't have to be about to get a master's degree or a certain age or a certain point in your career to just decide I'm just getting started. I'm also recognizing that I have more time and energy in a lot of ways than I did 10 years ago when I had a 3-year-old. I have more capacity and more flexibility than I had back then for sure. I also have more, when I had a 3-year-old, there was certain things that I wanted to invest time in related to my family, related to being around for my kid. And of course, those things are still a huge priority, but they've shifted in terms of where I'm needed, where I need to invest energy, how I need to invest energy. So while the energy I'm investing in family relationships is no less important or crucial, it looks a lot different than it did 10 years ago. And that feels really exciting. There's a lot of freedom that's coming with that. Also bittersweet at times. Luckily, my son still loves to snuggle on the couch, sometimes too much, and sometimes I feel smothered. So I'm really enjoying this expansiveness that comes with, I have a lot of time left in my career. I can do so many things. And there's an expansiveness that comes with that helps me feel like I'm on the upswing. I'm just getting started. And there's so many more places to go. And then the last rule that I'm breaking in 2026 is around legacy. And so when I think about legacy and legacy rules, it's easy to think about legacy for me in terms of our parents or our parents' generation career paths and picking a job and staying in it for 40 years and then retiring and having a pension. And that's just something that for the most part doesn't exist anymore. And for the most part, people aren't choosing anymore. People aren't staying in the same place in the same role for that amount of time in most circumstances. And this really gives us permission to shift what legacy means. And so I think for a long time we thought legacy means that we have to have this really big, huge, visible impact. If we can't be Oprah, why bother? And really, I think we can recognize and embrace that legacy can be quiet. Legacy can be influence in small ways that have very meaningful impact. And so how you want to measure legacy is on you, not on society, not on, what social media determines to be influential or significant. It's really on you. And so shifting from my legacy has to be big to matter, or my legacy has to have certain measurable aspects to it, or be really visible in a certain way to matter, to really thinking through what does legacy mean to me? And then not how am I living that in a way that is big over the course of 40 to 50 years, but how am I living that in a way that is big right now? And so I don't need to know my long-term legacy at age 50. I want to focus on my 2026 legacy. So for me, that looks like, what are the values I'm going to uphold this year? How am I going to challenge myself this year? How will I make meaning out of the things in my life this year that I have the opportunity to make meaning out of? What does success look to me right now in this season? That's building legacy. And so thinking through how can we shift our mindset around legacy building to be something that's meaningful right now, not something that we wait to look back on at the end of a career or at a certain season of life, but that we look at in terms of like, we get to build legacy in 2026. What does a 2026 legacy look like? And I love that idea of creating kind of this more bite-sized components to legacy building, where we're stacking them one bit at a time, year after year, and then we can look at what's the impact of that over time. So as you're thinking about 2026 and where you want to go, I want you to think about what rules you want to be breaking. Maybe they're the same categories that I had here. So we talked about productivity, we talked about confidence and communication and visibility. We talked about midlife career narratives, and then we talked about legacy. Maybe your rules that you want to break are in those categories. Maybe they're totally different. Regardless, I would absolutely love to hear. So please come share over on LinkedIn, or you can always reach out to us and email at hello@saradean.com. What matters to me most is that you understand what you're going to stand for this year, what you're going to uphold this year, why it is meaningful to you, and then go do the things that are meaningful to you in ways that are meaningful to you. I hope this was helpful. I'm so excited to be wrapping up 2025, kicking off 2026 with you. It's always an honor to be here with you. And especially in this reflective time of year, in this reflective season, it feels really special to be able to think through some of these important pieces together. So thanks for spending time with me. Share this episode with others who might be helped by it, and know that as we move out of one year and into a new year, that I continue to be in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit saradean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at saradean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at saradeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.